And our first speaker today is Ms. Paula Becker, who introduced herself earlier. She's the Outreach Ecologist Volunteer Coordinator with Maryland's Wildlife and Heritage Service, and she's going to be talking a little bit today about the benefits of native planting, and I think we all know how important that is in the critical area. So I'm going to hand it over to Paula.
Thank you, Michael. Let's just see if I know what I'm doing. Okay. Can you all see that?
Looking good.
Yes.
Okay. I used to do a grand introduction about why we're all part of this great ecological web and we all depend upon one another, which is all true. But really, people just want to hear that native plants are just better, and this is why they are. So to get into this, when we're talking about native plants, I'm talking about plants that have evolved over the last, about 11,000 years in this given region, and therefore they are adapted to the local soil and the local climate in which they have all grown up. So they've co-evolved with the local soil microbes, with the local insects, with local birds, mammals, herps. They've all evolved together. So they have this long-standing relationship. And usually when we're talking about invasive versus native plants, we peg the year at around 1500 of the Common Era, because that's when the majority of European plant species really started making an appearance here. But it's really important that we talk about those plants that have been around in the Mid-Atlantic region for the last 11,750 years or so. So one of the benefits, or one of the reasons that native plants do so well here, is they do not require fertilizers, because the nutrients that they need, they can either get through their own root systems or through an incredibly complex web of mycorrhizae and other soil microbes. And mycorrhizae are the underground filaments of fungi. And what they do is make nutrients that are in the soil available to the local plants. They put them in a form that the plant can take up. And in return, the plant provides them with sugar that it makes from photosynthesis. So they already have a food source, so they don't need fertilizers. And they require fewer pesticides because they already have ongoing relationships with the native insects that are here. So they've figured out a way to cope with pests or predatory insects, if you will. So they don't need pesticides to help them along, which is what lawn and other non-native plants need, because they have never built up that relationship before. In fact, most native plants, including and especially all of Maryland's 51 species of native orchids, require a relationship with a local soil microbe population in order to survive. Without that local soil microbe population, they don't get the nutrients that they need. And if you dig up a native plant that you find in the wild and move it to your yard, it's highly unlikely that that plant will survive, because your yard is going to have different microbes because it's a different kind of habitat. So the locals need their mycorrhizae. Exotic plants, or plants not from here, be they invasive or not yet declared invasive or non-native, many of them can actually change the soil composition because they don't support the microbes. So the microbe population can change and, in fact, reduce number of individuals and individual species. And some plants, like garlic mustard, which I'm sure no one is actually planting right now, but it's already out there, some native plant or non-native plants will actually kill the soil organisms, which makes it less hospitable to the native plants. Compared to lawns, which is a European landscape type and has a whole other history of why we want lawns, native plants just use less water because they already are comfortable in the native soil types and water regimes that we have here. They provide better erosion control because they generally have deeper roots, especially deeper roots than yard grass. They reduce carbon emissions because you don't have to mow them, but they do a better job at sequestering carbon because of those deeper roots, and because they support again, it comes down to the soil, and soil is one of the great carbon sinks in the world, as long as we have a healthy soil. In fact, once established, native plants just require less maintenance overall. Now, we do have to remind people that it might take them a little longer to get established than a non-native plant that you pick up at the garden center. And this is the rhyme we use. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. So if they don't take off right away, be patient, they're getting settled in. Native plants provide habitat for native animals. It's just that simple. Again, they all co-evolved, so the animals know how to use the plants that are there, and the plants know how to use the animals too. So there's going to be, for insects, a pollinator relationship. So the plants get their pollen moved around, they get their seeds fertilized and dispersed by insects and birds, and occasionally mammals and herps. And in repayment, the animals get a place to live and something to eat. And our native plants support the whole life cycle of our native animals. A lot of native animals, particularly butterflies and other insects, might require a particular larval host plant in order to support their caterpillars. So swallowtails all have particular host plants. In this case, the spicebush swallowtail requires the spicebush in order to lay their eggs. They'll lay their eggs on the spicebush. The caterpillars will come out and eat the spicebush leaves. Without a spicebush, you are not going to have the adult butterfly. And for most of our butterflies, there is usually not necessarily a one-to-one, but a one-to-few. Butterfly might use 2 or 3 host plants, but some of them only use a single type of host plant. If we plant something like butterfly bush, that's not a host plant for any of our native butterflies, and the nectar that it supplies is not the same nectar that you will find in native flowers. Nectar composition will change depending on the flower. There's going to be a different combination of sugars, and there's also a different combination of minerals, which is what, in this case, the adult butterflies are getting out of the nectar. So if they're drinking only the nectar of a butterfly bush, they're not getting all the nutrients that they need. I liken it to a Coke machine in a high school cafeteria. Oh, sure, they like it, but is it really good for them? And rarely does a native plant only serve one animal or one animal species. For instance, the zebra swallowtail here seen nectaring on golden ragwort because adults can nectar on a lot of different flowers, but she will only lay her eggs on the pawpaw. Now, if you've ever crushed a pawpaw leaf, you know it smells very acrid, like tar, and the compounds in the sap make it smell like that and taste like that, so other animals won't eat it. So she can lay her eggs on the pawpaw and they will be safe from browsing by deer and other animals. But once the eggs have hatched and they've eaten the leaves of the pawpaw and they pupate and they emerge as an adult butterfly, they can nectar on several flowers. But then that pawpaw will produce fruit, which is then available to a whole bunch of other animals, including us, because it is our largest native fruit, but it's also enjoyed by deer and bear and possums and raccoons and birds once the fruits start to rot, and other butterflies when the fruit starts to rot. Other butterflies like to sip off the very ripe liquor from rotting fruit. Native plants promote biological diversity. Why do we care? Because ecosystems that have the full complement of all of their species that can live optimally in that ecosystem just are healthier. They are more resilient. They can respond to changes in the habitat, changes in the weather better because they have more flexibility with all of those native plants and the native animals that they support. They're just more resilient. When you add non-native plants to an ecosystem, you actually lower the biological diversity because many of the non-native plants will outcompete native species. And again, since they don't support native animal species, the number of native animals that are using that ecosystem will decline. So you just have, when you use native plants, you have a more diverse ecosystem. And they're also better able to fight off disease because they have that resilience. This has led to some really interesting research. A lot of it is coming out of Finland right now, although there are other researchers working on this at different places around the world, which has led to this hypothesis known as the biodiversity hypothesis, which states that if a human being is living in a fully functioning ecosystem with all of the native species there, including native plants, native animals, and the native soil microbiota, the human immune system will be stronger because that human immune system evolved in the presence of many more microbes, some good, some beneficial to our health and some not. But the beneficial microbes will help beat up on the non-beneficial microbes. And we're talking about microbes that are naturally found on your skin or naturally found in your gut, so that people who live with more diverse microbiota will have a healthier immune system. This means that there are going to be lower rates of, and this has been seen, lower rates of allergies and asthma and depression and a whole bunch of different autoimmune diseases. So that people who grow up in a rich ecosystem with all of its native flora tend to be healthier. Native plants improve human health. There's a really interesting study that went on in Finland using daycare centers as research sites. They found 10 daycare centers in 2 large cities in Finland, and these are urban daycare centers. And they brought in, and they measured the gut flora found on the kids' skin, the gut flora and the microbiota found on the kids' skin. And then they brought in essentially chunks of forest. They brought in native plants with the native soil, and they put them in pots around the daycare center. And they encouraged the kids to run and play and touch the native plants. And they watched the kids for a month, and at the end of the month, they measured their microbiomes again, and they found out that the microbiome populations on the kids' skin and in their gut had increased. And we have found that an increased or a more diverse gut flora leads to a healthier immune system because it encourages the growth of immune cells, specifically T cells and NK cells or natural killer cells, which are used to fight off not only general infection, but also cancer. So if you have native plants, then you are going to have a healthier human population. And it will raise your property values. I love this. It has been found, the National Association of Realtors has found that by using native, there is a redefining of curb appeal, and that people are willing to pay more money for a home that has been landscaped using native plants, which boosts the resale value of the property, and it decreases the time on the market. So if you put a little money up front in your native plants, on your home's landscape, you can get more money for your property, and you have to spend less time worrying about it being on the market and time being wasted. An ecological services study was performed over a 20-year period that demonstrated that over that 20-year period, on average, it costs about $3,000 to maintain an acre of native plants versus $20,000 for an acre of non-native plants, because those non-native plants are going to need more inputs. They're going to need fertilizer, they're going to need pesticide, and if there's grass involved, it's going to need mowing, which burns fossil fuels one way or another, and it uses your time when you could be doing other things. So they improve the ecological value of your home. So if we look at all of this together, fewer inputs on the plants, there's less water being used, less time mowing, you get habitat for native animals, and if you like watching birds, you're going to want native plants, because the majority of our native birds, 96%, require an insect meal or insects as part of their diet throughout their life, because insects are fat and protein, which is what you need if you're a growing animal or if you have a large migration ahead of you. You need that energy. So if you like birds, use native plants. It promotes biological diversity, it improves human health, it raises property values. So all in all, we get ecological health, environmental health, human health, and real estate or financial health. So what's not to love about native plants? If you have any questions about where to get ideas for planting designs, we have some of that on our Wild Acres website on the DNR page. If you're looking for inspiration, which is always the best place to start, there are wonderful places around here with native plant habitats already built into their landscape. If you're looking for additional resources like plant lists, or where to get native plants. This is always a sticker for some people. How do you find a place that sells reliable native plant material? The Maryland Native Plant Society has a list on their website, which is not comprehensive, but it's a good place to start, and there are a lot of great suppliers there. Also, keep an eye out right now, because all the cool nature organizations are having native plant sales, and that's just crack for me. I mean, I go there and I just drop a paycheck really easily. So there are, now and in the fall, are great times for planting. So keep an eye out for native plant sales. If you want to get into native landscaping, but it's a little overwhelming, check out the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council. It's a consortium of private landscapers who have come together to basically define what is native plant landscaping, how do you do it, what points do you need to keep in mind when you're doing it, and if you don't want to do the work yourself, they have a list of people, a list of companies who are certified to do that kind of work. Plus, CCLC also offers certification training. I think it's a three-step project to get certification, but they hold the trainings themselves. If you're looking for a list of native plants for your area, nativeplantcenter.net is the way to go. What this website is an interactive website where you can plug in what your soil is, what your sun is, what your water regime is, where you are in the state. Are you in the coastal plain? Are you in the Piedmont? Are you in the mountains? And it will spit out a list of plants. You can pick flowers by color. You can pick them by flowering time. It's got trees, shrubs, herbaceous, grasses, and aquatic emergence in there as well. And what this did was take the Bible, Native Plants for Wildlife Habitat and Landscaping, and I put it into an interactive website. So you can use the website, or if, like me, you just like to go through books and write down notations, I keep a copy of the Native Plants Guide in my car. And then, if these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, The 6th edition of the Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic is about to come out. It was delayed. It was supposed to be out last December, but we're all really excited. It should be out probably by May. So the plant invaders are the do not plants, absolutely not, never. And the native plants are the ones that you should be planting. And in the back of the Plant Invaders Guide, there's a plant this, not that. So it gives you viable alternatives to previously used invasive species. If you want to read up more, everybody talks about Doug Ptolemy because the man knows what he's doing. And what he has put forth is that when we plant with native plants, we are not only enhancing our own properties and our own health, but we're also creating surrogate habitat for native species around us, native wildlife around us. And we know that the greatest hit to native wildlife right now is loss of habitat. So merely by using native plants in landscaping, you can actually boost the habitat. Richard Love wrote this book back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Last Child in the Woods, and it talked about what he coined nature deficit disorder. At the time, he was talking sort of broadly, but we now know there's actual research that talks about brain chemistry, how it changes when people are out in nature. And we now know about the immune system work. So Richard was one of the people who got it started in the modern era. Thanks very much for listening. If you have any questions, this is me. Feel free to contact me, email, phone, that's my cell since I'm rarely in the office these days. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Hey, Paula, I was going to say, I saw this Doug Talamay thing he has for communities called the Meadow Project. Have you reviewed that?
Well, Doug has done a couple of different really cool things. One is essentially creating your own national park. He's getting people to view their properties as an extension of the natural world. I have not reviewed the Meadow Project yet, but I have reviewed other people's reviews. And meadows are a habitat type that have been lost or changed so much over the centuries that they've lost much of their functionality as an ecosystem. And what he's espousing is that we embrace the meadow in our yard. The concept of a lawn, the European concept of a lawn, really took hold here in the United States just after the Civil War. And the plants that we use in our lawns, all of those grasses are either from Africa, the Middle East, a couple of them are from New Zealand, some are from South America. The closest thing we have to a native lawn grass is Bermuda grass, which is native to the southeastern part of the United States. So the grasses that are native to here tend to be taller, like prairie grasses, like little blue stem, big blue stem, Indian grass, all of which are beautiful, but they don't make this big green carpet of a lawn, which was a prestige issue back in Europe. So what Doug is espousing is that we should embrace our native grasses. And what's really cool is when you get the native grasses, you get so many more native butterflies and skippers, which means you get more birds, which means you get more bird song, which makes people happy. So yeah, go meadows.
Well, that was awesome. I just I don't want to jump in in case people have other questions, but we were just kind of a few people in the office were chatting during this, and what a fantastic presentation. We were all saying we need more native plants for the office, and I personally can attest to this. I know there's the state has the backyard buffer program that's been going on recently, and I just picked up a bunch of shrubs and trees for that, and I've got kind of a little area in my backyard that is just it's a war zone, right? Because I guess back in the day it used to be a kind of a dumping area, and then invasives moved in, and So I've drawn the line, and my wife and I are doing our best to hold the line and plant as much native stuff as we can. And
be strong, man.
And yeah, I mean, I have a like a very, very virulent dislike for multiflora. It's like I know it's alive, but it's almost like it's a sentient being, because anytime I'm out there, it's like thorns are just reaching out for me and trying to like poke through my whatever I'm wearing. So
well, that opening picture in my slideshow where my little neighbor girl is helping me with my Joe Pyeweed. I planted that Joe Pyeweed after taking out the multiflora rows. It took me 3 years. Blood, sweat, and tears. But then afterwards, there is in fact a virus that is targeting multiflora rose right now. It's called rosette virus. So although I'm not a big fan of multiflora rose, it does make pretty flowers and it smells nice in the summer. But there's already a virus that's attacking it, so I've been able to direct my wrath toward the wisteria vines that are taking over my yard.
Yeah. My neighbor planted some
I've
wisteria
got some
last
that are
year.
like 5 inches in diameter, and I use them for presentations now.
They have my neighbor planted a wisteria right on an arbor on our fence last year, and I was like, oh God.
Yeah, invasives are just job security, man. You'll always have a gig if you go after invasives.
Yeah,
but that was really, really great. Again, I have recorded everything, so I can I'll definitely make an effort to share this with people who weren't in attendance, because I think it's extremely valuable information. I love the fact that you referenced all these different studies about the immune system and the microfauna that we have, and how creating biodiverse native habitat has these impacts. I think that's a really good way to reach people sometimes, when you just take it about like you're not a tree hugger, you're talking about actual health, mental health, and physical health of people, and how that can translate into just direct consequences. So really awesome. I've been flapping my gums. I'm sorry. Does anybody else have any questions about this before we move on to our next presentation?
I do, if it's okay. This is Nancy with Queen Anne's County, and for all the same reasons Michael just mentioned, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're in the process in Queen Anne's County Parks right now of trying to, I won't say eradicate just yet, but at least control Phragmites on many of our shoreline properties. And one of them, actually, Claudia is very familiar with, Ferry Point. We're trying to do like a mow spray implementation plan. And we know it's going to take several years, but do you have any recommendations? We're doing this for exactly the reasons you mentioned, to, promote biodiversity and encourage regrowth and reestablishment of native species. But any recommendations what we can do in the meanwhile, while we're trying to eradicate and get these frag under control to promote native growth?
Get yourself a support group. And the way that you do that, the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center in Edgewater has been doing some really interesting work on removal of frag. And this is one of those double-edged swords. You take the frag out, and there is nothing else there that is holding down the soil, so erosion of the shoreline increases. So you have to balance the removal of frag with replacement with something native.
Right.
Environmental Concern down in St. Michael's has some really great wetland plant selections. They are one source that we use for that. But it is a long term. It is do a little at a time. And it's just tedium. It's just embrace the tedium. There's nothing that can make it go faster other than more people helping. The more you can get the community involved in at least understanding what is going on, the easier it will be for you at the outreach aspect of things.
Yeah.
But if you can balance the taking out with the putting in, that would be my only recommendation.
Yeah, that's the part that's problematic. We actually just rolled out a statement to the public this week so that they understand what's going on down there, because they're used to just seeing all this growth and they don't understand it's invasive. It's just, what can we do to stabilize the soil and reestablish plants you know, in the meanwhile, while we're doing a mow spray program, because anything we plant's going to be hit by the spray. So, you know, I don't know if we're trying to do it in sections, you know. There's no way we're going to eradicate the entire area. It's 42 acres and it's pretty significantly covered with frag. So yeah, well,
as far as stabilizing the soil from wave action, the only thing that I have seen that has worked in research, mind you, is a combination of putting up a temporary breakwater, which then gets moved as the soil builds up behind the breakwater, and you plant it with the native plants. Then you go to the next section. So you do it in essentially impoundments.
Time sections. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me pick your brain.
You do a great job, I'm sure.
We're trying.
Well, thank you again, Paula. That was a fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you being able to participate. And we have recorded this. I think you said you were going to send me a PPT or something with all the links and everything. So I will definitely broadcast this out. So the different planners from municipalities and counties around the state can share in your knowledge and wisdom. And thanks again. So
you're welcome. Go, Claudia.
So kind of to piggyback on what we were just talking about with the frag, we are going to transition to our next speaker, Claudia Donegan, who is the director for the Center for Habitat Restoration and Conservation, and Nicole Carlozo. Am I butchering your last name? Sorry. Natural Resource Resiliency Planner. Both these ladies work for Chesapeake Coastal Services, part of DNR, and they are going to be talking about restoration through resiliency program. So take it away.
Allow me to share my screen. And I wanted to say we have like 5 staff doing that Chesapeake Landscape Council training. So it's a good training for planners and everybody. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, really?
Not yet. Yeah, just see.
I see it. Let's see here. It says I'm sharing. It could be. Can you share it so we don't waste too much time? Mike, have you brought it up?
Hold on 1 second. I do not have it prepped.
It's this thing with Teams, I think.
It's a little glitchy sometimes, yeah.
Well, we had it loaded and then it unloaded because we do. Sorry about that.
So we're looking at the resiliency.
The Chesapeake and Coastal, it's the Center for Habitat Restoration 1. I have it. It's showing me that I'm sharing it. It's being very weird.
Do you have 2 different screens up?
I didn't think so. Let's see. What do we got? There it is. Yeah, maybe I do.
Nothing's happening.
Do you see it?
See a blank screen.
Weird.
Yep, there you go. Just you had it. You had it.
Right here.
There we go. Yep. Start the slideshow and you should be all set.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. It wouldn't be a Zoom or MS Teams presentation if there wasn't some technical difficulties.
All right. So you see you see it, but you see that all my slides.
Yeah, right. So if you go to the slideshow, if you start the slideshow, then it should. I
am doing that. Resume slideshow. All right. Well, that's not what you guys can look at all my fun little pictures on the side. I would like to figure out how to. Anyway, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our group since we do work with a lot of planners. I mean, we are here to support the planners throughout the state. So the Center for Habitat Restoration, we provide technical financial assistance to local governments, communities, NGOs, And we're, very much focused on the restoration goals for the Chesapeake and Atlantic coastal bays. And we really are into community engagement. We want to engage communities in restoration. And you guys see everything okay? Hear me all right? You guys?
Yeah, I can still see and hear you now.
Okay. Did you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So
It's just still you're not in the presentation mode, so
I
it's
know.
fine.
I keep pushing it. I just don't want to do anything. It's being stubborn. So sorry about that. Anyway, so we have three groups in our three, I guess, focuses in our group is community restoration, restoration science, and the Shoreline Conservation Service. And I'm going to talk more about the Shoreline Conservation Service today. But I wanted to tell you about these other groups because I really do think that they link back to a planner's life. And like I said, we're here to support the planners in the state. So the community restoration is the big focus here is to get community groups engaged in bay restoration. And we've taken on some large scale restoration projects in neighborhoods. Let the neighborhoods lead the projects, and they are complicated when citizens lead them, but they also turn out to be the best in educating and furthering bay cleanup messaging. So if you all have ever heard of Cattail Creek, the Berrywood Community Restoration Project at Severna Park, or Pines on the Severn Living Shoreline, or the St. Luke's Restoration and Nature Project in Annapolis, those are all led by this section of our group. We also provide leadership for the Corsica River. We staff these programs, Corsica River Project, the Chop Tank Initiative. And then we do conduct technical trainings throughout the state, and our most recent one has been on stream restoration techniques. We have a group that focuses on restoration science, and they inform design, and they also inform our restoration projects, keep us up to date, and on what are the best things we can do to make these projects more resilient to climate change, for example. Let's see. The next one. Everybody here okay? Michael?
Yeah, you're still doing.
Okay, good. I'm just worried about this Wi-Fi. So the Shoreline Conservation Service. So this is providing shoreline preservation, restoration, technical assistance, and financial assistance. And we're really focused here on innovative restoration practices that stand up to climate change. And the shoreline program in HRC was established through a law in 1968. And it was really there was massive erosion going on all the shorelines. And it was a loan program to individual homeowners. We still have this no interest loan program. It's for local governments and communities for the most part. But we probably might be going back to giving these loans to individual loan owners. They're out today, all of them giving technical assistance and site evaluations to shoreline owners. It's with climate change and sea level rise, we have a lot of demand, and so they're out there today. The messaging. Oops, I skipped a slide. Sorry. Their messaging is, let's do a living shoreline in place of bulkheads if we can. Living shorelines are a technique to reduce erosion and enhance habitat. And all these critical area planners know this, have seen these. We really do encourage people to put in living shorelines. And the typical features are marsh, beach strand, headlands, cobble, shingle beach, and woody vegetated debris. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Another one of our big messages that we talk about is that, erosion is not a bad thing. It's a natural process. All the beaches on the Severn, they're fed by these cliffs that are eroding, and they provide the material for marsh and offshore habitats. So there's ecological health of the estuary depends on erosion. So you can't button up every shoreline. These are some design considerations that we discuss with homeowners when we go and see sites, and we also do a lot of projects on public land. This picture is of Chesapeake State Park. This is a recent shoreline project. It was a highly eroded coastal area just before you go over the bridge onto the Chesapeake Island. And then these are the considerations. You can see it's quite a lot you got to take in, and also communicate with people when you're trying to have them think about their shoreline and how to manage it. These are shoreline erosion control techniques you guys have all seen. You've got the sill or the rock revetment versus something a little bit more natural, but we're having an evolution right now in how people manage their shorelines. You know, the traditional approach was the revetment or the wooden bulkhead. And as we going down, we've seen a lot of issues through the years. You know, water gets behind these. You know, the problems associated with these structural approaches is that they are any straight line in nature is going to get beat up by nature. So, you know, these approaches fight nature instead of working with it. And you've got a lot of issues with storm surge when you get water behind a bulkhead. And then a little more educational messaging that we provide, the gray versus green infrastructure and structural solutions versus nature-based solutions. And Nicole's going to talk a little bit more about that. She has a program that's focused on getting these nature-based solutions in the ground. This is a very common practice throughout the bay. The high-profile sills, and the segmented sills, the high-profile sills that have no windows in them, so that creatures in the bay can get through to the habitat that's been expensively planted behind there. And you know, they may be necessary in some areas, but they're not a preferred technique that we advocate for. The headland breakwater, you know, this came to be about 30 years ago. It really did the trick. This is the book that really launched it. It maintains coastal geometry, but also gives you more accessibility of aquatic habitat wildlife to your beach system. And here's the one that we did at Chesapeake. You know, this is the vegetated headland structures. We don't call them breakwaters. And it's, you know, they're maintaining the natural aesthetic, but they're also maintaining coastal geometry and coastal processing. And so these are really great evolution of the headland breakwater structure. Here's one. This is at Seabeck. This was built 20 years ago. It used to be a bulkhead. And you can really see how those vegetated headland structures have just kind of grown into the landscape. They look completely natural. But also that's like a 20-mile fetch coming up from the south to the Chesapeake Bay Environmental Center. And Nancy knows this area well. In fact, here's a Nancy landscape. This is Conquest Beach. This is a, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. This is a shingle beach. A relatively new approach, but if you were the Bay, you'd say this isn't new. This is what we have in Sassafras, Port Deposit, northern part of the Bay. These are long beaches that are made, restored with coarse material, cobbles and sands. They really hold up, we think, to climate change. They are, and they also allow for the coastal processing, and they maintain the geometry. So this is Conquest Beach. If you want to see it, it's a beautiful park that Nancy is the manager of. There's a really interesting partnerships that help with these projects. So you can circle back to us and find out how to get one of these built in your neighborhood. This is a recently completed project, and Nicole's going to talk about it more a little bit. This was funded through the Resiliency through Restoration program. And this shows a variety of practices. You've got your segmented sill, you've got your vegetated headland structure, although this was just built, so the vegetation hasn't really taken on. And then this is the shingle beach. This is at United Methodist Church Camp down in Shadyside, Maryland. The other thing that this project has, there's a really unique feature, which is the regenerative storm conveyance, which is an upland structure, or BMP, that ties into this shoreline project. And the reason this is so interesting is that here you've got a shoreline project that now it's not just, you've got the upland connected to the tidal area. So you're really looking at this project as a whole ecosystem. And I think this is a cool video. This was a coastal event, it was last fall. And you can really see, now what was great is that this church put up a 24-hour camera all through the construction of this project. But you can really see through this rain event how, well, it was, first of all, huge tides. Watch that pier just go underwater over there on the right side. And then how that water goes up into the RSC, which is right here behind the little sitting area. And then, completely inundate. They see the water coming up around the pavilion here, completely inundated. And then we also have cool footage of the construction process of this through the same camera. Now you see the water going out. Oops, sorry about that. Now you see the water just leaving the project. And this is what makes these projects so great, is that you can have storm surge, you can have high tides, they roll right into these restoration projects and they roll right out. They don't get lodged behind, structural things like a bulkhead. And they're very seamless ecosystem wise too. Great habitat now has been made for Maryland terrapins and young of the year fish. Looks like it started raining, but you can see now how this just, the water goes out. So it's a really cool site. If anybody wants to take a tour, we'd love to take you there. This is just to kind of organize how these projects get funded or get the technical assistance. Wes Gould, he is the acting director of the Shoreline Conservation Service. I think you guys probably have met Bhaskar Submarinium. Wes took his place when Bhaskar went to NOAA. And then Megan Granado is Restoration Finance. So this is the Atlantic and Coastal Bay Trust Fund. It does pay for some of these type of projects. And then Nicole's program, which is Resiliency through Restoration. And she'll talk to you next. So that's our program. Those are our focuses. Sorry, I couldn't get the slide part. And then this is me. If you need any more information, if you need someone to come out to your community or whatever it is that you're dealing with, we have great staff that provide technical assistance. So thank you. And I'm going to hand it over to Nicole. Hopefully she'll have better luck than I did with my slideshow.
I'm going to try.
Stop sharing.
Can you guys see my slides?
Yeah, you're in the presentation mode. So I think if you click the slideshow, we'll see if it works.
How about that?
Excellent.
You're good. Yeah, you're good
Great.
to go.
Thanks, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nicole Carlozo. I work in DNR's Chesapeake and Coastal Service. I am currently the acting section chief for the waterfront and resource planning section within our coastal planning group. And in this role, I manage the state's Resiliency through Restoration initiative. So I'm going to talk about this program today. It's a relatively new program. It was launched in FY18 through the state's capital budget. And it originally allocated, the budget allocated up to $16.5 million over 5 years to support design, construction, and adaptive management of restoration projects with a focus on resiliency. So this program focuses on restoration projects that enhance community resilience to the impacts of climate change. And we're really focused on the impacts of water quantity, so factors like coastal flooding, precipitation-induced flooding, and erosion. And on this slide are just some photos from a few of our project sites. The top left-hand corner is the West River Methodist Center that Claudia just talked about. This was a photo that was taken during construction last summer. The top right-hand corner is during a sunny day flood event down in Deal Island in Somerset County. This project site is actually under construction right now and should be planted up by the end of June. So we're seeing progress there. And the bottom left-hand corner is, you can see all these down trees. This is at a very high or high energy long fetch site in Anne Arundel County at Franklin Point State Park. You can see, if you look really closely, the two little people out in the water here. These are some of our staff members that are monitoring elevation at this site. And one of the unique features of the program is that we're trying to do baseline and post-construction monitoring to really be able to develop case studies about practices that work, different types of practices, nature-based practices that work in different types of locations throughout the state. These are just some of the long-term goals of the program. First, to reduce Maryland's vulnerabilities to climate change impacts. Our center does that by working with communities to better understand their risk to coastal hazards, working with communities to plan to address that risk, and then focusing on implementation of nature-based solutions. And the Resiliency Through Restoration program really focuses on that implementation phase of putting green solutions or nature-based solutions on the ground. The second goal is to improve our understanding of the benefits of these types of practices. We are primarily doing that, as I mentioned, through monitoring of these natural solutions, and we're working with our Chesapeake Bay Natural Estuarine Research Reserve staff to develop monitoring protocol. And primarily we're looking at factors such as elevation, vegetation, and sediment, although we're also eager to look at other factors like wildlife benefits and fisheries when we have the capacity to do so. Third, we're working to elevate the use of an understanding of where these practices are feasible and practical. And again, this is being accomplished through monitoring. And we're also currently working with George Mason University and the Nature Conservancy on a project that's funded through NOAA's Ecological Effects of Sea Level Rise program. And that's what this diagram down here is depicting. We're working with those folks to monitor and model the wave attenuation benefits of different types of natural features. So we've monitored a number of sites throughout the Bay, and either later this year or early next year, we'll have statewide data available to better understand where natural features are providing the most benefit for reducing flooding and providing wave attenuation benefits. And then lastly, of course, we're always working to demonstrate public-private partnerships, really working to leverage not only state funding, but also federal and local funding to advance project implementation. So like I mentioned, this program supports restoration practices. We primarily support design and construction and adaptive management. And the short-term goal of the program is to demonstrate how these types of nature-based solutions can help enhance community resilience to climate change. And we're doing that through the implementation of pilot projects. So this map shows some of our projects. They're in different phases of design, permitting, and construction. This map is actually not up to date. We originally had a goal of implementing up to 15 projects, and we're currently working on 22 projects throughout the state. Primarily, or initially when the program was launched, we focused on coastal and shoreline projects, but since then we've also expanded to working with inland and urban communities that are dealing with stormwater flooding, and we've been able to support communities dealing with those impacts as well. So projects come in through DNR's Grants Gateway solicitation. This is open every year. We should be opening in July. It's usually open July through December. This solicitation has a number of different outcomes. The outcome that that we're working with for the resiliency funding is outcome 3, utilize natural and nature-based infrastructure to enhance resilience to climate change. Local governments are eligible, nonprofits are eligible. We do sometimes work with community associations and churches. Really, we're focused on designing and implementing nature-based practices. So these include components like wetlands, dunes, riparian forest buffers, green infrastructure solutions, and some of the different practices that Claudia mentioned in her presentation. And like I said, we really primarily focus on water quantity impacts, although we do try to document the co-benefits for water quality impacts through these projects. We have a number of data sets available through our Coastal Planning Center to help us screen projects that come into the solicitation and to help us with targeting of projects. This is one of those data layers, Maryland's Coastal Resiliency Assessment, to help identify shorelines where coastal habitats can provide risk reduction benefits for communities. This is available on Maryland's Coastal Atlas platform. This is a whole presentation in and of itself going through this data, but wanted to share that this is available. And if folks dig into this and have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions about it. So every year we do try to select projects that represent different types of practices, different geographies, and different communities. And that's primarily because right now we're still in our pilot phase for the program, and we're still trying to demonstrate different types of practices throughout the state. And we'll be working towards documentation of that through case studies. Projects are selected based on a number of different factors, and I've listed those here. The two most important things that we look for are coastal exposure reduction and ecological enhancement. So we're looking for practices to be as green or as natural as possible while still meeting the project goals. And we're looking for projects that provide protection benefits to community infrastructure or community assets. We can support projects on private property, but they have to provide some type of community-wide coastal protection benefit or demonstration value in order to be eligible. And then I also did want to mention that one of the ways we're looking at addressing climate change is that we work with our grantees to integrate climate change data into the design process. So we have our state sea level rise projections that were released in 2018. And then we also have a number of we also request for our inland communities that maybe aren't dealing with tidal impacts, that they look at the Northeast chapter of the 4th National Climate Assessment precipitation trends, or looking at local precipitation trends and projections, or updated IDF curves for practice design. We're really trying to kind of push the envelope and looking at not only historic conditions, but also future conditions when designing these projects. So Claudia mentioned this project. I wanted to share just a few of our pilot projects that are underway right now. I need to update this slide. This still shows the project during the construction phase, but we did implement a resiliency through restoration project at the West River Methodist Center in Anne Arundel County. You can see here these headland features. These have been vegetated since this photo was taken. So this project, like Claudia mentioned, has 3 different components. We have our vegetated headland features here, and all of this sandy area behind this was also planted. To the left of that, going down the shoreline, and that's a more linear practice, we have our cobble beach. And these 2 practices did replace a wooden bulkhead that was deteriorating at the site. So previously that had a lawn all the way out to a bulkhead, and there was limited access for campers and visitors at this site to access the water. Now there is an increase in the availability of access points. And then behind these structures, to the left of these trees and to the right, we have the regenerative stormwater conveyance systems or wetland complexes that trap and slow and treat stormwater as it makes its way down to the West River here at this project site. Just wanted to mention that this site hosts over 10,000 campers annually, so we see it as a great value for a demonstration site. It's very easily accessible. We can bring folks out to it. We held a planting day over the summer where the campers helped out with planting the site, and we will be monitoring this one with the church camp to provide any lessons learned to other communities or organizations that are interested in similar types of practices. Most of this project was funded through our program, but we were also able to leverage some trust fund funding for the wetland complexes because this project provides not only the coastal benefits, but also the water quality benefits. The second site I wanted to highlight is the Deal Island project down in Somerset County. Hopefully in the next few months I'll have updated photos for this slide. You can see here at the top left-hand corner, back in the 1990s, this area had an extensive vegetated dunal system. Over time, this photo was taken in 2014. The dune system has disappeared. Now there's a marsh complex, and behind the marsh, there's a main road going into the Deal Island community. There are also residents and homes that are situated behind this marsh complex. The community was very concerned with the shoreline being breached and there being an increase in risk for flooding in the community behind this marsh. You can see here in this photo from 2018, this was during a nor'easter. The site was breached here. The water then did flow in and then it flowed out, but the community is concerned of this becoming the new normal. And then you can see here this shoreline study shows erosion since the 1970s. So this site is currently under construction now. We designed a headland breakwater system with a dunal restoration component. It was really because of the feedback from the community that we even knew that dunes existed here in the past, and we were able to integrate that into the design for this project. We're also working with the Chesapeake Bay Natural Estuarine Research Reserve staff to monitor this location, and we'll be doing so for at least 3 years post-construction. And then lastly, I wanted to show another project that's focusing more on stormwater impacts. Like I mentioned, since this program was launched, we have expanded the program to also address stormwater-related flooding in our more inland and more urban communities, and to demonstrate how green infrastructure can be used holistically to address that flooding. So our first urban flooding project was funded in the city of Hyattsville through the Low Impact Development Center, and they're working on a submerged gravel wetland project. You can see here on the right-hand side, this triangle is the site where the project will be implemented. This site was actually identified through a stormwater planning study that was done for the larger region. And so this is one of many practices that the community will be moving forward with implementing. We're really excited to see how we can use this as a demonstration for how smaller scale projects can work together over the long term to address flood impacts. And then we're also able to leverage the trust fund for this project as well, because there are also water quality benefits here. So while the resiliency program is funding the design element, our state trust fund is actually going to be supporting the construction element for this project. And lastly, I just wanted to mention kind of the next phase of the program beyond design and construction is adaptive management. And we're defining that as the active monitoring and adjusting restoration, a restoration practice in the face of changing and dynamic conditions. And so there are a number of things that we would require to justify a return to DNR for adaptive management funding. And they include project monitoring and maintenance. And so So like as I mentioned, we're working with the National Estuarine Research Reserve to develop monitoring protocol. We are working with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science to monitor a number of sites. We have limited capacity for monitoring all of the sites funded through the program. So currently we are working through the Maryland My Coast application, which is a phone app where community members can post photos of flood events and storm impacts. So we're actually working to develop a restoration tracker as part of that app to work with community members for documenting changes along the shoreline over time and pre and post storm event as a community science monitoring component. And then we also have worked with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay on the West River Methodist Center project to develop a maintenance plan template. And that project actually just closed out this past month. So we'll be making that template available on our website for other partners who are interested in assistance with planning for maintenance activities. And here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. This program works very closely with Claudia's program and the restoration science folks. Really, we're just here to fund the projects and help in the right locations and work to implement projects from a planning to implementation perspective and tell the story, basically, of resiliency through restoration.
Thank you so much, Nicole and Claudia. That's another fantastic presentation about the work you guys are doing. Before I start rambling on, I wanted to just open it up to anybody who may have questions or comments.
And I just wanted to say, the reason we're presenting today was that you will be seeing these projects come through your critical area review. And they're going to have elements that you're like, what's with the dune and why is it designed to go out 30 years? We're checking off boxes and the right designing of these projects because they're a big investment. We want them to last. And so just know that if you get a resiliency through restoration or one of our shoreline conservation service projects, that we're here to interpret some of the design elements.
I could just briefly say that I know we work really closely with MDE on some different projects and stuff. So I'm sure, there's a lot of coordination and collaboration on these types of resiliency projects. So, and I know some of the staff are involved in the Coast Smart and whatnot. So it's always good to be kept in the loop. But does anybody have any questions for Nicole or Claudia? I specifically love the, nature. If you have a straight line, nature's gonna kind of
mess it up.
You're right. You think about it, you don't see many straight lines in nature, right? It's so to the fact that a lot of these bulkheads and revetments and whatnot they're just, they're unnatural in so many ways. And that video was also really, really awesome, showing how that having like the stormwater conveyance feature in there, how the water just didn't get trapped. I live right outside of Annapolis, and all the time you go downtown and it's sunny day. I could go down there at lunchtime and maybe half of downtown is flooded if there's some sunny day flooding going on. It's kind of crazy, and just all gets trapped, right? It all goes right behind the bulkhead, and the whole area gets streets are closed, and areas where people are supposed to be just got to be able to sit around and enjoy the town just are totally inundated with water. So
yeah, put your hand on one of these granite rock revetments some summer day and imagine the thermal toxicity of that type of heat in this young of the year fish and animals that are trying to live up in those places. So that's another reason the vegetated headland structures are such an important evolution.
Absolutely. And it just the water's going to find a way to get around it, and there is just a temporary solution. It's not it's a band-aid of sorts. So it's great to see the work that you all are doing, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to present. And I've got PowerPoints and whatnot. So I know this is extremely relevant to a lot of the local planners. We have a lot of, I also really like the erosion part because we have a lot of people who are, they don't necessarily understand the importance of erosion and shore erosion control and erosion, upland erosion are sometimes confused, and different methods need to be, a holistic approach needs to be thought about to properly manage these things. So all this information will be going out. The recording is ready to go. So thanks again to everybody who presented. I just have a couple of quick updates, and then I will cut you all loose for lunch since it's a beautiful day, and cut myself loose for lunch since it's a beautiful day, and you stop hearing me ramble on. We do have some exciting news for the few participants that are around. I will be blasting the rest of the municipalities and counties about the fact that we're going to be doing some site visits, long overdue site visits for quarterly planners meeting. The next one that's going to be coming up in June. I believe our date is June 16th, but I'll confirm that with an email. We're going to be going down to the American Chestnut Land Trust, and we'll have we have a rain date also on June 29th for that, and we'll be doing some presentations down there, and we'll be able to get a little information about the facilities and the property, and hopefully do some hiking if it's a nice day. And in October, October 16th, again, date is subject to change, but we will have our Eastern Shore site visit. We definitely try to balance the Western and Eastern Shore, so people don't have to burn too much petrol if they don't want to, especially with gas prices these days. So that's coming up. We have been conducting some critical area training for new planners around the state. That's going very well, and we're getting some really good feedback about that. So if you have not gotten into it, or if you're interested in it, please let us know. You can contact me or your local planner. We're putting together some town trainings as well, so that is on the horizon. And I can't really say much about any regulatory updates because that's outside my wheelhouse, but I believe our regulations coordinator is around, unless she skipped out to lunch early, if she wants to give any quick blurbs about it. Putting you on the spot, Lisa.
I'm still here. We don't have anything that is particularly brewing besides our usual updates that we're working through methodically. Our Title 27 of COMAR. We recently had something, we had an update February 9th, and you can check our website, but if you have any questions, always reach out to me. COMAR is always continually updated online, so you can always use that as a resource. But most of it are just minor tweaks, and we don't have anything to report at this time.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. So unless anybody has any closing statements or questions, I will thank everybody for their participation today, and I will get some PowerPoints and video links and everything like that out to everybody so they can share in this great meeting today with all the awesome information that our presenters put out. So thanks again to Paula and Claudia and Nicole for giving us some time.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for your work.
Absolutely. Great. Everybody enjoy the weekend.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.